Hello and welcome back to the game room. You know what I like? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. And it seems like a lot of people these days who cover games seem to hate them, or at least the people who play them. Well, that's not me, and that's not the 1,668 of you beautiful people. We are 2 subs away from 1,670, 32 from 1,700. Crazy. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm a sports ball fan, so this is a victory Monday for me and my San Francisco 49ers in dominant fashion, which was very nice to see after the way last season ended. But that's not why you're here today. Today, we are going to be talking about 2004. Now, I have gone on the record of stating that I think the greatest year in gaming is 1998. Well, one of my comments throughout the year 2004. And I know other various people talk about this year as well. I know it's the one that Asmongold brings up all the dang time. And looking at the list of games, it is a solid year. So let's go through 2004. Let's talk about some of the games I have experience with. Some of them I don't. And then where do I think it stacks up as far as greatest years of gaming of all time. There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life.
This is my game room.
So in 2004, I graduated high school. I was starting college, so a lot of the reason why I may not be as familiar with some of the games on this list is the entire back half of the year, August onward, I was kind of removed from the gaming scene. I mean, one of these games I think came out in that time frame and I did play and loved, but just my gaming in general took a hit as I was adjusting to life out of the house, going to college for the first time. That, and also the same issue I had with the 98 list is there's some games that came out in 2004 in Japan that people consider 2004 releases, but in America they came out in 2005. But we'll still go through them. I'll add them on this just so we can go over it. And the first giant release we're going to talk about is World of Warcraft. Amazing game. I was hooked on it. However, one thing to bear in mind is the funny thing with WoW and a lot of these games as a service, when the game launches, it's drastically different than when you play it down the line. A recent example would be something like No Man's Sky. That came out in 2016 and people hated it. And now 7 years later, 6 years later, 8 years later, it's got all this content. No Man's Sky in 2023 is a completely different game than it was when it launched. And obviously for World of Warcraft, a game that is now going on almost 20 years old in a couple of years, is drastically different. They've had 10 expansions. They've even re-released the original version. And even the original version had 12 different patch cycles and all this added content and all this change and everything. So the game that came out in 2004, when most people think of vanilla, they probably think more 2005 WoW. But anyways, 2004 WoW came out. Huge game, really set the standard bearer for MMOs, got a lot of console gamers like myself into PC gaming. It didn't last, but that is something to bear in mind. But let's talk about some of the big releases that I am familiar with, that I do have, that I would agree with. So one of the ones that, it's funny, I didn't know this came out in 2004. That's the thing, is a lot of these games I wasn't aware were 94 releases, but one of them is Def Jam Fight for New York, which is my favorite of the Def Jam games. It takes that Aki engine that was so fun in No Mercy, pairs it with a bunch of gangster rappers, and you have incredible combat, zaniness as far as who you're playing with. The fact that you can play as Snoop Dogg and then go and start DDTing fools is incredible. And I've talked about it before, it's just a very solid game, and unfortunately one that's become insanely expensive. At least the GameCube one is, but I know the PS2 one has gotten pricier as well. Now, another 2004 release that I loved and is still my favorite in this series, even though there was a game that just came out in the series that was very good, which we'll talk about in another video, but that is Pikmin 2. So Pikmin 2 took everything that made the first one great. It cut back on the stringentness of the time limit. It introduced these cave systems where you could find 2 new types of Pikmin. And in the cave systems, time did not move. So you could go and spend all the time you would want in there. You could have all 5 different types of Pikmin. You could have up to 100 Pikmin at the offset. And it was great to control. If you're wondering why I'm adding that, is because one of the things they've done in Pikmin in recent years to artificially elongate the length you play it is they've given you restrictions starting in the third one with how many Pikmin you can have out, and then starting now in the fourth one, I believe, they've only made it so you can have 3 types of Pikmin out at once. Whereas in Pikmin 2, you could have all 5 of them to your heart's content. You could have a group of 80 purple, 2 blue, 2 yellow, 2 white, 2 red, but anyways, I love Pikmin 2. It is, even though 4, we'll talk about 4 when I do a Pikmin video. 4 is a phenomenal game. If you have a Switch, you should pick it up, because if you like that, then playing Pikmin 2 will be enjoyable. Now, a game I was not aware came out was the DS's version of Super Mario 64, where they finally answered all that speculation and those mysteries of, is Luigi playable? Can you unlock him? It was a big rumor mill back in the day, being able to play as Luigi or Yoshi. Because originally Luigi was supposed to be in the game, but not so. So I often thought, when I found out about this, I found out about this years later. I didn't even know about this when I knew the DS was a thing. That's how out of the loop of handhelds I was once I went to college. But this is a really solid game. It was an interesting remake where they added more to it. I just can't go and play it because, once again, I'm not a fan of the DS. One of these days, I hope they make some way where you can play these on your television. I know there is a consolizer mod you can do to 3DSs or DSs, but it's super expensive, and I'm hoping there'll be some sort. There'll have to be some sort of solution down the line. You would think Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, so the sequel to the very good Metroid Prime, which was the first Metroid game I ever played. Though I enjoyed it, and when I heard Metroid Prime 2 was coming out, I didn't enjoy it so much that I wanted to play it again. And that was me a lot back in the day, is unless I was a ginormous fan of the series, if I tried one of them and had a good time, I was good. I didn't need to get the sequel, which I regret sometimes because a lot of those sequels were stupid expensive. But Metroid Prime never gelled with me. It's funny, after I bought Metroid Prime, I tried to play the original Metroid, which I just did not enjoy. Had I picked up Super Metroid, the story might have been different, but hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles there. Now, another game that came out in 2004, which kind of goes in line with my justification for 98 being the greatest years, because there's a lot of sequels that people point at for 2004 that may have upped the ante, but don't have the same impact of all those games coming out at once, like 98 having Half-Life and Ocarina of Time and Metal Gear Solid. So for 2004, you have Half-Life 2, which by all means is a better game than the original Half-Life, but it's still a difference. Like for 2004, you have Counter-Strike Source, which is a upgrade of Counter-Strike, finally gives it its own dedicated engine, I believe, something of that nature. But still, it's based on that. You have The Sims 2 come out, another sequel. And then a remake of Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, which is something that I am not a huge fan of. Other than getting to the part with Psycho Mantis saying the thing about liking Mario games, I didn't get much enjoyment out of it. But the one that everyone should know, which arguably is the best game in the series, it's getting a remake right now, is Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Now, I was not a huge fan of Metal Gear Solid 2, but Metal Gear Solid 3 is a very, very good game. It recaptures a little bit of that cool factor with the villains that the first one had. It has a nice story. There's some unique boss encounters, like the one with the Sorrow especially is one of those moments that sticks with you. It's great to see Revolver Ocelot back in such an interesting capacity. You're actually playing as Big Boss, as the game takes place in the 60s. It's more or less an origin story that shows you how, Solid Snake, the original Snake, Big Boss, gets his name, and probably there's hints of how they're going to be cloning him and things like that. But still, compared to Metal Gear Solid 1, it's an evolution of it, but it's not enough for me. Like I'm going to be saying in this video, 2004 is a phenomenal year. I'm not debating you on that. But a lot of what people think of it that makes it phenomenal is merely just a high point in a series that started in 98 for a lot of these. But here's one that I will give you that is damn excellent, better than the first one, and that is Halo 2. So once again, like I said, in 2004, I was in college. Now, I could have sworn Halo 2 came out before I went to college. By looking at the dates, it couldn't have. And it just was the first game that really made online multiplayer a thing for console players, if that makes sense. Like, I vividly remember playing Halo 2 on summer break or on Christmas break at friends' houses, going online and having those death matches, going to Ascension, going to the Glass Tower place, finding the sniper rifle, fighting over the sword, going to Lockout. Like, this was a very, very important game as far as educating the masses, or us unwashed console heathens, at how online gaming could be. And so I will give you that. That is a big thing that I can't say 98 did, is that 2004 is really when the online gaming competitive multiplayer scene started coming to shine. Although, unfortunately, I don't necessarily think that's a good thing in the long run, because it really changed how the industry moved forward, started to go away from single-player experiences. But Halo 2, phenomenal release. But again, it's a sequel. It's a sequel to Halo 1, which Halo 1 had online capability as well, I think. Or at least LAN capability. All right, and here's the biggest release from 2004, which is Grand Theft Auto. Well, maybe World of Warcraft, but still, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. So this was definitely a game I picked up. I can't remember if this came out in the fall of 2004, so I would have been in college. I would have played this in my dorm room. Had a great time. At the time, I hadn't watched the movie Friday or anything like that, so I didn't get the analogs to that. Instead, it just felt like a really cool game where not only in this one could you go to Los Angeles, there was a version of San Francisco, and then there was a version of Las Vegas, and you had little, like, almost farmland countries in between it. And being from California and having just taken that trip from San Francisco to the outskirts of Los Angeles, I was in Santa Barbara, but still, that was most of the way down to Los Angeles. It was a cool thing to be playing a game where it was representing my home areas to an extent. Not great. And then they added things where you could dress your guy, you could get your guy fat or skinny. There was the whole hot coffee mod thing, but that was for the PC people, which didn't affect us console plebs. And it was a great game, don't get me wrong, but I remember playing San Andreas and at a certain point getting to it and being like, okay, there's nothing else to do in this. I've beaten it. And it didn't have the lasting appeal. It doesn't have the gravitas for myself that I think people laud onto it that it gets now, because I still prefer Vice City, and GTA 3 I think was a more important game when it came out than San Andreas. So San Andreas, like a lot of these games, a lot of these are the polished version, the best possible version of the game that came out, while not capturing the freshness of it. So you're kind of retreading old ground. And I guess that would be my largest argument with why I don't put 2004 over 98, is a lot of it is retreading old ground. You don't have the first 3D Metal Gear game or the first 3D Zelda game. Now you got stuff like Resident Evil 2, so I give you that, where Resident Evil 2 is just essentially evolving on Resident Evil 1, but they do so much more with it. Alright, so the last few we have here that I have physical copies of before we start going to the list of games. So another game that came out in 2004, which I'll give you the innovativeness, is Katamari Damacy. So I played that on the Switch. Not my game, a little too weird. Great, unique music, I'll give you that, but just not something I was incredibly interested in. Now, I did pick up a game called Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow. So this was one of the few PS2 releases I picked up back in the day, because I had heard the first Splinter Cell game was great, so I wanted to jump into this. I think this is the second one, and then there's Chaos Theory, the third one. I enjoyed it, but it was not as much fun as the Metal Gear games, or as much fun as Rainbow Six that I enjoyed on the N64. It felt like the stealth was a little bit too required. A game that I didn't play that I have a copy of is Gran Turismo 4, so I'm imagining another realistic racing game. So yeah, you're evolving the series in that, but it's just more of what Gran Turismo started, which I think that was in 98. And I talked about this last week, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. So the first one of these came out, which these are huge hits with a lot of people who love BioWare games and these Western RPGs. Onimusha 3, which I picked up after I mentioned I had no experience with Onimusha, and in one of my franchise videos, and someone said to pick up the third one, so I did. Now here's one that came out in 04 in Japan, but did not come out here in the West until 05, and that's what I'm talking about. That's Zelda Minish Cap. Now, this game does not get enough love, Part of the problem, I think, is that so many of us Zelda fanboys really love Link to the Past, and so Minish Cap kind of gets left by the wayside. Same with Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons. The only one that doesn't fall in that category is Link's Awakening. Like, there's a strong Link's Awakening camp. Not so much for Minish Cap, or if there is, they need to be more vocal about it. I played Minish Cap for the first time when one of my buddies gave me a copy of it because he was such a fan of it, and this was in 2016, I want to say. And I loved it. I had a great time. It really deserves its place in the pantheon alongside the Link to the Past, Link Between Worlds, the Link's Awakening. It's a very solid game, and I believe the main villain isn't Ganon, which is a shock, which shows you can do it. It's got a gimmick in it, but it's a fun gimmick. It has a side character that talks to you incessantly, but it's a fun side character that talks to you incessantly. And it's a top-down Zelda game that's worth its salt. And unfortunately, after Ocarina of Time and before Breath of the Wild, the 3D Zeldas were not impressing me all that much. So going back and seeing that they still can make 2D Zelda, like they did with Minish Cap and then with Link Between Worlds, kind of what makes me wish that we would get some more of that with Nintendo. But hey, they're doing Super Mario Wonder, so maybe one of these days we'll get another Link Between Worlds type situation. That'd be pretty cool. Burnout 3 Takedown, my favorite in the series and one of my most played PS2 games, and one of my favorite PS2 games, came out in 2004, so I will give you that. But once again, it's a third game in a series, and it's not something like Metal Gear Solid where you're going from 2D to 3D. In this, you're just improving on the formula, which damn did this game do it. But then again, I haven't played Burnout 1 or 2, so I don't know how much it did. Though if you look at recent attempts to make it, or even the later games, like I didn't enjoy Burnout Paradise that much when I got it for the 360. Alright, and that's it for the games that I physically have experience with or have in my collection from 2004. But looking at the other ones that I didn't mention, so a series that did get its start in 2004 is Far Cry. Far Cry still going to this day, huge. Even had a movie based on it. Another game that came out that was a new series was Fable. So I don't have experience with Fable, but people do love that series. Sly 2. I think there was a Jack and Daxter 3, or just called Jack 3. So a lot of sequels in 2004. I mentioned The Sims 2, Spider-Man 2, probably based on the movie at that time. Red Dead Redemption's successor, which most people don't realize Red Dead Redemption was the sequel to a game called Red Dead Revolver, though completely different games in the way they play as far as storylines and all that. Doom 3, which is probably not something that's going to be all that well regarded for people, because I've heard people who love Doom 1 and 2 do not like Doom 3. And then another game that came out in Japan that came out here was Dragon Quest 8. So Dragon Quest 8, that came out in 2005. And then we have another PC game I've heard about a lot, which is Vampire the Masquerade. That had a remake recently, which I've heard isn't as good, or was it a sequel? But Vampire the Masquerade has a lot of fans. Chronicles of Riddick came out in 2004, which is a kind of a surprisingly good game from what I've heard. The fun Metroid Zero Mission came out in 2004. Killzone started in 2004. So there are a lot of solid stories. WWE SmackDown versus Raw came out in 2004, which was sort of the successor to the Aki engine, No Mercy type games. A game called The Suffering, the reimagining of Ninja Gaiden. So that was cool, but the Ninja Gaiden series kind of tailed off. But yes, 2004 all together was a solid year. Had a lot. I mean, they had a remake of Pokemon Red and Blue, Pokemon Leaf Green, Fire Red. I don't know if there was a Water Blue, but once again, all of these are a lot of remakes and re-evolvings of things from days past. So ultimately, while 2004, in my opinion, is a phenomenal year, nothing to shake a stick at. You got game changers like World of Warcraft, you got great games like Burnout 3, San Andreas, Metal Gear Solid 3. At the end of the day, when you stack it up, it is just a phenomenal year, but I do not think it is the greatest year of all time. But let me know if you think I'm wrong. Let me know what you would argue with, because I think I've laid out why, even though it's very good, it's not 98 in my opinion. But I could be wrong. So yeah, that's what you guys get for today. Apologize for my rambling and my edits, because I know I've made some mistakes in this, and that's why the problem with did the game come out in 04-05 is really annoying. But as a reminder, I release a new video every Tuesday. I have a Patreon if you'd like to support the channel more. It's so nice hearing from you. It's so nice seeing people discovering old videos. Just this week, I had a gentleman who was looking for more two-player game recommendations for retro systems for him and his son. So that's pretty damn cool. So I'm going to try and look in the well and see if I have any more of those I can suggest, because I don't... Some of the systems he suggested, like the Saturn, the Dreamcast, the PS1, PS2... I don't really know as far as two players go. And then even some of those systems, I don't really think of two-player games. Like, I don't think of two-player games on PS1 and PS2. But hey, let me know if you have some suggestions. I'd love to check them out. Maybe even make a video talking about them, or at least checking them out. Anyways, that's what you get for this week, guys. It's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.